Well, hi there. I don't know whether this is going to be interrupted or not. We've got a thunderstorm today and wild weather forecast. The dog hates thunder, so she's got her snug thunder vest on that calms her down, and she's huddling in a bed under my desk. Um, the cat's come in and she's sitting right beside me on the desk. So everyone's battened down for a thunderstorm here today. I want to talk about a client. I'm going to call her Katrina. She and her family used to live in Darwin, but they were in Adelaide on holiday when Cyclone Tracy arrived out of the blue and almost wiped out Darwin completely. After the cyclone, her father went back to see if there was anything left. There were the stumps of the house, because you know, Darwin houses, like Queensland houses, are built on stumps. But there was absolutely nothing left except a terrified cat who was hiding in the rubble. The neighbours had been feeding it while they were on holiday, but the neighbours were evacuated and the cat had hidden. So they managed to rescue the cat and bring it back to Adelaide. The family were fine. They moved to Adelaide. They didn't go back to Darwin. Katrina's never been back to Darwin. But she's the oldest child, and she just felt really much more responsible. And she became a total hoarder, unable to part with any of her belongings, even rubbish. It was really sad. Losing her home and all their possessions was total. Oh, there's another interruption. Hay fever happening around here was totally traumatic for her. The younger two children weren't affected by the cyclone in the same way, but Katrina became a lifelong hoarder, and it affected everything in her life. It affected her marriage, which broke up after a few years. It affected the business she went into, and which she didn't manage to make successfully, but she had dreadful trouble getting out of it. She has settled now. She was also smoking very heavily, so she came to me initially to quit smoking, and then after that she came to sort out the rest of the problems. And she's settled now and happy. It ended up being a great story. But I've got another story about another man who was in Darwin as a child. He was on a flight out of Darwin when the government was actually getting everybody out in a hurry because the cyclone was about to hit. But it was already windy, very windy, by the time he left. And he came to me absolutely terrified of wind. Anytime there was a storm, he would be really, really upset. The storm wind, in fact, high wind, really threw him, and he just couldn't go on working. He had to go home and sit quietly somewhere. So we managed to fix that one too. It's amazing things that happen in your life, and trauma remains in the body, in all the tissues. You can't logically say, that was 30 years ago, I'm going to get rid of it. Because the tissues in the body don't know what 30 years means. Trauma is stored in the memory, in the muscles and tissues, in every cell of the body. It's not stored properly in your mind, because the mind becomes completely overwhelmed during trauma, and you just don't format things properly. So we were able to get over that one too, and he works perfectly happily in wind and storms. I'm sure he's out on the road today working, even though we've got high wind and bad weather alerts over Adelaide, plus thunder rolling around. I don't know whether you've been able to hear it in the background, but it's certainly around. We've got thunder and rain happening outside the window. So it's interesting. When weather is really bad, it can be very difficult. Personally, I have something that I had to get over for many years, and that was fire. I can only assume it was a leftover from bombing raids in the war. But as a child, for several years, I always used to have this ongoing nightmare, night after night, that the whole world was on fire. Thankfully, I've sorted that one out now. I sorted that out myself using the method that I've developed for dealing with trauma. Because that was awkward, because I was always scared of fire. And we did have fires, as you know, in Australia. We had the bush across the road from our house in Sydney when we first moved here as a 9-year-old. That lit up a couple of times. As a 6-year-old, the house was on fire. Fire had got through a broken chimney. That was another remnant of bomb damage. Lots of remnants of bomb damage in my life, but I'm over them all now. And then when we had the Ash Wednesday fires in Adelaide, we were on the very edge of the fire. When we lived in the foothills, I had to get special permission to go home after work, because I knew my son would have gone up, even though we had to go through a roadblock, because my son would have gone home on his bike up the back lanes. And of course, the police didn't block the back lane, so quite a lot of children actually go home up laneways and shortcuts and across empty blocks and miss out on knowing that there are roadblocks around, which is just difficult. Anyway, I got home. He was fine. We rushed around and he climbed up and put tennis balls in the gutters and filled the gutters with water. Tennis balls above the downpipes. And the girls and I ran around the house pulling all the curtains down so we didn't have flammable substances inside against the windows. We picked up precious belongings. We got the cat in a cage and the dog on a lead, and we were ready to be out the door the moment we were told, because when I drove into my road, I found the police roadblock that I had to talk my way past, and the whole end of the road was a wall of fire. 2 summers ago, when my youngest daughter was over here for Christmas, there were a lot of fires in Australia. And she said to me, "Oh, Mum, do you remember when we had to go in and the whole end of the road was a wall of fire?" I remember that so clearly. So, yeah, it's something that has remained in her mind too. I've got over all of that, but wild weather is interesting. If it's traumatic for you, you need to deal with it because it remains in your tissues and you've got to be able to neutralize it. And this is what I do to help people like Katrina and like Michael, who I helped. Thanks. Talk to you another time. Bye.